Hi guys, I'm Elle and welcome to another video. Sorry for a bit of a hiatus. Things sucked for a while. They still do, but not quite enough for me to be where I was. So I'm here. So today's video is going to be talking about forgiveness. I don't have any talking points written out for this video. Usually I do have talking points written out. I don't, but we'll just see what happens. I think the first thing I want to say about forgiveness is that it's really scary and it's really hard, and I think a lot of the time it's really difficult to actually know what forgiveness is. I think I used to think I'd forgiven people when really I just kind of moved on and not thought about it in a while, because when I would think about it I'd get annoyed or upset or mad or whatever, I don't know. I'd like feel all the emotions again. So it's like, well, have you really forgiven someone? But then at the same time, I don't think forgiveness is just being okay with things. So it's kind of a bit of an ambiguous one. I really think it can differ person to person depending on the situation and who you're forgiving and what happened. I think something that can make forgiveness difficult a lot of the time is because if someone has wronged you, especially if it's in a situation where you know that you would never do that to that person, or that you would have never been in their shoes, and they've so kind of easily done it to you, then it can almost feel like, why would I forgive them? Like, I think a lot of the time it feels like people should have consequences, and it feels like there should be some kind of like direct punishment for what they've done. And I think a lot of the time withholding forgiveness can feel like you kind of giving them that punishment, just because a lot of the time that doesn't come, you know, someone doesn't get punished or they don't get any kind of consequence, or at least sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And so it feels like, I feel like not forgiving someone is kind of holding on to that kind of illusion of a consequence or a punishment, when at the end of the day, obviously this doesn't apply to every situation, as I say with all my videos, a lot of the time your forgiveness won't matter to that person. A lot of the time, if someone has wronged you and if someone has done something unforgivable to you, if you don't feel like you can forgive them, then they are probably a person who is not all that bothered about your forgiveness once everything's said and done. I think a lot of the time people would like to be forgiven, because I don't think anyone loves to live with the idea that they're a bad person, or that they have actively upset someone, or that someone is actively still upset because of them. But I think at the end of the day, your forgiveness is sometimes just like a bonus. It's like, well, if they forgive me, then obviously I'll feel a bit better about myself, but I'll live. So I think sometimes you don't have to forgive people. Sometimes it feels good to withhold it and to say no. Like, maybe you've forgiven this person over and over and over again, and you withholding that forgiveness is that final kind of act of, this is me drawing a line and this is me showing you how I feel, which can be a good thing, which can be such a good thing, because that's setting a boundary. And it's kind of breaking an expected cycle of behaviour. If you forgive someone again and again and again, and they think they can just get away with things because you're such a forgiving person, then withholding that forgiveness can kind of stop them in their tracks and stop that expectation. However, I also think sometimes it can be harmful if you're withholding the forgiveness for the other person's sake. Like I said, like if you're kind of doing it because you feel like they need to be punished or they need to be held accountable. Obviously, a lot of the time people do need to be held accountable, but especially if you're kind of like not really talking anymore or you're not in contact, then your forgiveness isn't really like a tangible thing to them. It's not something that they need to earn, because like I said, it's not going to make much of a difference to them anymore. So if you center forgiveness around the person who needs forgiving, then I think a lot of the time it can become kind of skewed, and it can become a bigger thing than it is. It's not an act of kindness for them. It's an act of kindness for you. I think a lot of the time forgiveness can be like the first step to moving on and moving forward. And if you forgive someone and you stop dwelling on it and you're ready to move forward, then that can be an act of kindness for you to stop you from dwelling and overthinking and stressing. And sometimes forgiveness can be an act of kindness for you in the way of you being aware of your nature as a person and knowing that maybe they would have never done that to me, but that's the difference between us, so I'm going to be forgiving. Or understanding a person's reaction and their emotions, but maybe not why they reacted that way or why they feel that way. So saying, well, just because I don't really understand where you're coming from, and maybe I don't understand why you treated me like this or why you behaved like this, that doesn't mean that you're the worst person in the world, and maybe I can just forgive you and move on. But again, if you're withholding forgiveness for someone, I also think that is an act for you. Like I said, that can be you setting a boundary or breaking a cycle. It's not to spite them, it's to serve you. I think that's the big thing about forgiveness, is obviously it's kind of like a two-way street in that a lot of the time two people are involved. So it can a lot of the time be like, well, I'm just not going to forgive them because I want them to be upset or whatever, especially if they've done something wrong, which I kind of imagine that if you're in the thing of forgiving them, not forgiving them, that they have done something wrong. I think, yeah, it can be sometimes like a spiteful thing, or an I'm so mad at you, you don't deserve this kind of thing. But if you take away that power from forgiveness and you take away that meaning from it for the other person, and you turn it into purely a thing to do with you and to do with where you're at and your emotions and what that means for you, I think everything becomes a lot clearer. Obviously, forgiveness doesn't happen overnight, and a lot of the time it's very difficult if the other person isn't doing anything to help you forgive them, if you're not in contact anymore, or if you don't see each other anymore, or if they've never acted sorry for their behaviour, then you might be thinking, well, how am I supposed to forgive them when they're still acting like this? Or how am I supposed to forgive them when this is the situation? And again, do you need to forgive them? If it's going to help you move on, then maybe you need to forgive your connection with them, or maybe you need to forgive the time you maybe spent or whatever, rather than them as a person, because again, take away them from the equation, take away their involvement with the forgiveness, and it suddenly becomes quite a different thing. I also think, obviously, there's a whole other side to forgiveness in it being a solo thing, in terms of forgiving yourself. I think it can be very easy to blame yourself for a lot of things, and it can be very easy to look back and think, I should have done this, and I should have done this, and I should have picked up on this, and why did I let this happen, and whatever. And you don't need to blame yourself for someone else's behaviour. If it's your behaviour, if you did something wrong, then like that self-awareness is the first step. It doesn't make everything okay. I will never kind of like preach the thing of like the audience did nothing wrong and the other person's always like the asshole, because that's just like an echo chamber type thing. I think self-awareness is really important, and I think people understanding their actions and what they've done is really important, and the effect that their actions have had. I think that's a very big, very important thing. I'll admit that I've done some things that I should have handled that differently, or I should have reacted better, and I have kind of processed that in myself as my own person and gone, now I know what situations work for me and in which situations I react badly, and I know how to handle things maybe with more grace and less kind of like impulsivity. So yeah, like I say, I am all for understanding your behaviour and why you did something. So I don't think it's the kind of thing of like, well, if you did something wrong, just forgive yourself and move on, and it doesn't matter anymore. I think wanting to forgive yourself is a really good first step in being able to, because then you can go, okay, well, again, forgiveness doesn't just happen overnight. Even if I sit here and go, I know what I did and I forgive myself for it, you won't forgive yourself for it, because you still have that feeling of I know what I did. So just because you say it and just because you have that mindset, it doesn't mean it's all just gonna go away. But that's a very good first step in being able to look at it and go, okay, this is what I did. In the future, how would I handle this differently, and how would I act differently, and what do I want to have happened instead of that, and how can I get to that point instead of that? And then once you put those things into action, hopefully you can come to a point where you go, I feel like I've done the right work and I've understood the right things and I've put in the right action to be able to forgive myself and be able to move on. Because I don't think it's healthy to blame yourself forever. If like that's common sense, I think that's kind of like a, you know, well, obviously kind of sentence, but a lot of the time it can feel like maybe you've done something really, really terrible and you feel like you'll never be able to make up for it, and you feel like you'll never be able to move on. And a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, I think sometimes that can be how people feel, and it can sit with them for the rest of their lives. And if that's how a person is, and if they do think they've done something so terrible that it stays with them, then unfortunately sometimes that's the way things are, but sometimes it's also not the way things have to be. If you are a person on a kind of journey of forgiveness in yourself, I think there's never any reason to not try anything once. Like, if you think like counselling or like journaling or like talking to certain people or doing certain like therapies, if you think it's all stupid and it's not going to help, I don't think there's any harm in trying it once if you have the opportunity to, because at the end of the day, if you really want to put the effort in, then what's stopping you? Like, you don't know until you try, and if it's all rubbish the first time, then don't go again. So I think you should try everything and exhaust your options, because at least you're trying, and that in itself shows that kind of like promise, I guess, and that effort. And if it's just trying to forgive yourself for maybe handling something badly, or you were in a situation where you made a mistake but the other person also made a mistake, and it's kind of like a two-way street type thing, and you both got into like an argument or a situation, then I think at the end of the day that's also one of those things where if it's an argument or just a little, you know, thing, and it all blew up in your face, but then 5 days later things are all different, and maybe you're not friends anymore, or you're not together anymore, or you don't talk to someone anymore, or you avoid someone or whatever, I don't know, like then I think you're then at that point where you can go, okay, this is the way things are now. How do I learn from that? If I feel like I did something bad in that situation, how do I learn from that? But I think the kind of thing of like forgiving yourself is almost easier in that situation. Again, not that it should be like snap and everything's fine if you did do something bad or you kind of handled something badly. But if it's more you handling something badly and it was a spur of the moment thing, or I don't know, maybe you snapped at someone, say, I don't know, something like that, or you made a joke to a friend that you kind of was a bit out of line, and then you went, oh god, maybe I shouldn't have said that. I think that's more a learning experience than it is something that you should like beat yourself up for. Learn from it, make the apology, do the right things, and then prove that your actions will follow your words and like your intent. So if you say to someone, I'm really sorry, and next time I won't do that, then next time don't do that. You know? So I think forgiving yourself can be a very difficult thing, especially if in that situation, like I said, you're also kind of waiting for someone else to forgive you. But I don't think you can always I don't think you can ever really base your kind of character off of what someone else thinks. Because sometimes people like to hold forgiveness to be mad or to be upset because they feel like you deserve a consequence, like I said, you know, at the start of the video, where it's like if you withhold forgiveness because you want someone to have a punishment or whatever, flip that around, and sometimes it's not because you don't deserve forgiveness, it's maybe because they have their own agenda, and maybe their own agenda is valid, but it's not always the full picture, so you can't go, well, they're not forgiving me, so I'm the worst person in the world. Maybe you've done something bad, maybe, but at the end of the day, again, it's about you putting in the right intention and the right effort and having the right attitude to be able to look at yourself and your journey and go, well, I was here and now I'm here, so that has to count for something. And if you look back at your journey and you haven't changed at all, and you've gone, well, I want to change, but then you haven't done anything to do it, then start. It's never too late to start. You can kind of have a bit of a moment and go, oh my god, that situation 2 years ago, I handled that so badly, or I did something so wrong there, and you can change tomorrow. You can start putting in the effort tomorrow. Just because the person isn't around anymore that you're making it up to, you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to the next person who's going to be in that person's shoes. You owe it to your next friend, you know, like, to be the better person. You owe it to yourself to be the better person. I think off the back of that, sometimes it can be hard to forgive people, because I think if they've done something bad or kind of wronged you, it almost makes you think, well, why should I forgive you, so that you get to kind of change and feel good about yourself, and kind of your friends and the people around you get to see this better version of you, and then I'm still here and you've still wronged me. But again, I think that's not the thing you have to think about, because that other version of them, if you're not talking, which kind of a lot of the time, if they've wronged you, that kind of thing, I imagine you won't be. If you're not talking and if you're not in their life anymore and if you're not going to be around them anymore, that changed version of them doesn't exist to you. So you can't withhold forgiveness and sit in that negativity for a potential version of them that may never come and that you may never see. Even if they do come, are you ever going to see it? Are you ever going to see this new version? Are you ever going to see this change? Unlikely, you know? So I think, again, the main thing is to take the power out of forgiveness, and to take forgiveness away from the other person, in the sense of like taking them out of the equation and thinking about whether it's the right thing for you to do and what it means to you and what you might get from it if you forgive, and who you're forgiving and why. And then that kind of helps you make the fully informed decision, rather than just thinking, someone's done something wrong to me, do I say it's okay, or do I stay mad about it? Because I think that's how black and white forgiveness can seem sometimes, but I think it's a very big, complex thing that isn't always just, do I move on or do I stay upset? I think that's two very, like, black and white A or B options that is not, a lot of the time, it is not the way things are at all. So, yeah. Yeah, this video was kind of a bit rambly and a bit out of the blue and probably a bit all over the place, but I just wanted to post something. I'll be back properly, hopefully, soon. But yeah, that is it. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching. You deserve the world and more. You are enough always, and I will see you next time, hopefully. Goodbye.